dive shop owner led two trainees into an unknown cave. After reaching the deeper section of the cave, the dive shop owner suddenly turned to the trainees and said, "Stay here and don't move." Without looking back, he swam deeper into the cave and gradually disappeared from their sight. The trainees waited in the dark, narrow cave for half an hour, but the instructor never returned. As fear began to grow, they were finally forced to make their way back on their own. The terrifying part was that they had no guideline rope and no leader to guide them. They could only feel their way forward in total darkness. Would they make it back to the surface alive? This is the story of the Beaufort Spring diving incident in the United States. Beaufort Spring is located on the west coast of Florida, about 10 miles north of Homosassa in the United States. From the surface, it looks like nothing more than a calm, shallow bay with perfectly still water. But beneath the surface lies a complex underwater cave system. This cave is known for its thick layers of silt and maze-like, narrow passages, and it is widely regarded in the cave diving community as an absolute no-go zone for beginners. In 2005, a diver who had only recently obtained an entry-level cave diving certification became lost here and drowned. In 2006, a recreational diver entered the cave out of curiosity and disappeared in less than 2 minutes after entering the opening. His body was only recovered several days later. On the morning of September 30th, 2007, 40-year-old James Cummins brought two trainees to Beaufort Spring for an open-water diving class. James was the owner of a local dive shop and held an open-water instructor certification. However, he had never received any cave diving training and held no cave diving certifications of any level. The two trainees were under his instruction, completing basic skills required for their open-water certification, which they expected to finish that day. Because the training was considered simple and conducted in relatively safe open water, all three divers carried only a single aluminum tank, one regulator set, and a primary headlamp. They had no guideline reel, no backup cylinders, and no specialized cave diving equipment. About an hour into the dive, each of their air supplies had already dropped by half. According to the 1/3 rule, James should have immediately ended the dive and brought the trainees to the surface. But at that moment, he suddenly changed his mind. He pointed out a small, unremarkable black cave entrance nearby and signaled to the trainees on a slate. He told them he had entered the cave alone a month earlier, and that it was simple inside, just a single straight passage that even beginners could handle. He insisted it would only take 5 minutes to go in and out, and reassured them that their remaining air was more than enough for a short exploration. Trusting their instructor completely, the two trainees raised no objections. Once they entered the cave, daylight vanished instantly, leaving only the weak beams of their headlamps cutting through the darkness. James led the way, with the two trainees closely following behind. As they moved deeper, the passage became increasingly narrow. While squeezing through a tight section, James kicked forcefully with his fins, instantly stirring up a massive cloud of silt. Within seconds, visibility dropped to near zero. Panic set in immediately for the trainees. With no guideline line to follow, they could only rely on the faint glow of James's light ahead to stay oriented. Then suddenly James stopped. He turned and signaled for the two trainees to stay where they were. Without any explanation, without placing any marker, he turned around and swam alone deeper into the cave. His light faded quickly, then disappeared completely into the darkness. The trainees were left alone in the pitch-black passage. They did not dare move, barely breathing, afraid that even slight movement would stir more silt. After more than 20 minutes of waiting, James still had not returned. At that point, they began to realize a terrifying possibility. He might not be coming back, and if they stayed any longer, they might never leave the cave either. The two trainees immediately turned around and began swimming back. With no guideline line to follow, they relied on a basic skill taught in open water training. One diver led by slowly feeling along the cave wall with their hands, while the other stayed close behind, holding onto the leader's fins to avoid getting separated. This method ensured they would not lose each other in the darkness and could trace their way back along the same route. They avoided swimming too fast, both to conserve air and to prevent stirring up more silt. Fortunately, the section of cave they had entered was exactly as James had described, a single, straight passage with no branches or side tunnels. After a tense and exhausting swim, they finally reached the entrance and escaped the cave. Because of the urgency to survive, they skipped any decompression stops and immediately returned to the boat. Soon after, both began experiencing clear symptoms of decompression sickness, including pain and severe discomfort. Once on board, they realized James was nowhere to be found. They quickly dived back toward the cave entrance to search for him, but there was still no sign of James anywhere. With no other option left, they returned to the boat and called for emergency rescue assistance. An hour later, a search and rescue team arrived on site. However, all of the divers were certified only in open water diving, so they were limited to a small-scale search around the cave entrance and found no trace of the missing diver. The following morning, professional cave rescue personnel arrived and immediately entered the water to search. About 20 minutes later, they discovered James's body inside a narrow rock crevice, approximately 90 meters from the entrance. His body was found tightly wedged between two rocks in a curled, twisted position. A close examination suggested that he had struggled desperately in his final moments. His air tank was completely empty, and his regulator had fallen from his mouth. No visible external injuries were found, and the condition was fully consistent with drowning caused by air depletion. This accident revealed a repeated violation of multiple fundamental diving safety rules. He was conducting cave diving without any proper certification. He severely violated the 1/3 air rule for gas management. He carried none of the essential safety equipment required for cave diving. In contrast, the 2 trainees, despite being placed in extremely unfavorable conditions, made almost all the correct decisions. Their survival was not a matter of luck. It was the result of calm thinking and sound decision-making under pressure.